Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third annual Energy Summit, proudly sponsored by EQT. My name is Brad Hall. I'm the President and CEO of the Southeast Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. Very honored to have you with us this evening. We've got some great folks with us, and I think you're going to be really enlightened with our speaker tonight. Before we get started, first of all, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. They're here at EQT. You guys give a round of applause for our sponsors. EQT has proudly sponsored this event. This is our third year, and they've sponsored it every year. We're very fortunate to have them and their community mindedness and partnering with us in bringing an event like this to the area. And so thank you all very much for your dedication to the event. I'd like to try to recognize our elected officials. I know we've got several here, so if I miss you, I apologize. But I know that Senator Johnny Ray Turner is here. Welcome. Thank you. Representative Hubie Collins. Representative Short is with us. And Judge Executive Jim Ward with us. We have a representative from Senator McConnell's Island. Donna McClure is with us this evening. Thank you very much. A couple of our city commissioners are with us this evening. Barry Cheney and Dallas Lane. And I hope I didn't miss anyone else. If I did, please stand and we'd be happy to recognize you. But thank you all for being here tonight. I just got a couple of comments and I'll move forward. But this is a coalition or partnership between Cedar Inc. and the Chamber of Commerce. And we John, Justice, and I sat down and thought about this program and what we wanted to do with it a few years ago. And the purpose was to help educate our business community on the challenges, the opportunities, and the importance of energy in this economy, in this area, in this region. And that's what I think we've done. I think it's become a great program. Again, we couldn't have done it without the dedication of EQT, so we're very thankful for that. And over these last 2 years, we've had some very prominent speakers with us. In our first year, we had Tom Harris, who's an international climate scientist from Canada, who came in and talked about climate change. And that was a powerful program. I still remember it today. And we had last year the former CEO of Shell Oil, John Hofmeister, and he was a very powerful speaker. And so you think, how can you top that? And I think tonight we're going to top that. So I'm going to save the introduction. John will take care of that, and Maverick. But great speaker tonight. But John, I appreciate your work in this event. Appreciate your dedication. He's a great person to work with, and very honored to have the opportunity to partner with him and Cedar in this endeavor, and we're very blessed, to say the least. As many of you know, in May, we changed the name of our chamber and changed the concept of what we're doing to a regional chamber of commerce, the Southeast Kentucky Chamber. We now represent 8 counties in eastern Kentucky, and it's been a challenge, and it's been a blessing. We now include Floyd, Knott, Lawrence, Letcher, Magoffin, Martin, and Pike counties. We've met so many wonderful people, so many new partners and friends, and we're very honored to work with some of these new communities that have just embraced us and welcomed us into their area so that we all can work together for greater things. Our number one regional project right now is commercial air. And a lot of us wonder if that can happen. And we're not there yet, but we just achieved a major hurdle. We received a federal grant for $750,000 to bring that service to eastern Kentucky. And again, this has to be a regional project, but that is one big hurdle that we have crossed. And so now we're working to move that forward. And so we really have a lot of work ahead of us, but that's going to be the number one project for us right now. You're also going to hear us start some talk on finishing the Mountain Parkway and on moving forward I-66. Those are 2 key projects for the future of eastern Kentucky. Our chamber is very much advocates for coal and natural gas, and I think everyone in this room knows that. We're very outspoken about that, and we understand the importance, and we want to be a resource for all the efforts in energy, coal, natural gas, that we can be. And I think we've proven that over the years, and we want to continue that. And so tonight I know I'm speaking to the choir on that, but as businesses, I think it's important that our businesses understand what can we do to support the coal, natural gas, and energy industry. What can we do? And so I've got 4 points that I want to hit home on that. We can educate ourselves on the issues. I think that's the number one thing that we can do as non-industry individuals. We can educate ourselves on the things that are happening in the industry. We can provide our opinions to our elected officials. Now, most of the time when we're speaking to, we like to call them the Mountain Caucus, we're talking to the choir. They sing from the same songbook. But they need to hear from us. They need to know that they have the support of their constituents. So we need to make sure that we have our voices heard with them. We can become educated advocates. Educated advocates. When you're out in different areas and they start asking you questions about coal and mountaintop development, that you have educated answers to answer those questions. And we can educate others. You know, I just had a wonderful experience with Leadership Kentucky. And Laszlo, Mike Laszlo's here, one of my leadership graduates. Where you at, Mike? Wonderful, wonderful experience, and I know a few of you have probably been through that. But you know, a humbling day was when we brought him to Eastern Kentucky. 62 CEOs, managers, presidents, various leaders from across this great commonwealth, and we brought them to Eastern Kentucky. And for them to see, touch, feel, smell, talk to the people. We took them in a coal mine. Alliance is here. We went in the Alliance Coal. Some of us did, and some went into one of the Booth Energy coal mines. And to see the aha moment of when they really understand what this industry means. And just a couple of words that I wrote down that day from talking to those leaders. They were surprised by the complexity of the industry. They were so amazed at the professionalism in the industry. Hospitality was the number one word that came out of that day. Respect, and just a true aha moment for them to understand the importance and the need and what it means to Eastern Kentucky. So that was a great time for me, but I think about that because that was my opportunity to be an advocate for our industry. That was my opportunity and Mike's opportunity to help them understand the importance of this industry, not only for this region but for our nation. So that's why we're here tonight, is to talk about these things, to help educate ourselves, and I think our speaker will do more than that tonight. So I appreciate you being here. We're honored to have you part of the Chamber of Commerce. We have such support in this community, in this region. It is amazing to me. I feel blessed every day, and I'm so honored to be here, to be your president of the Chamber. If you ever have any questions, if you ever like to talk to me, my door is open. Please feel free to call me. Now I'd like to introduce the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors for the Chamber of Commerce. Our chairperson couldn't be here with us this evening. Her name's Tracy Sick with Shred All Innovations. But our Vice Chairman is here, Mr. Jim Workman. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Rock Solid Records Management.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that introduction. Right now I'm reminded of my Communications 101 class at Marshall University so many years ago when we went over impromptu speaking. I was expecting Tracy to be here. Tracy, I cannot replace her. No one can. She's a wonderful dynamite of a person. If you don't know Tracy Sick, you should get to know her. She is on fire for our community. She's on fire for this region. She's on fire for the things that are going on in our chamber to support each of you, our chamber members in our region. On behalf of the Board of Directors for the Southeast Kentucky Chamber, I welcome you tonight. You're in for a real treat. We had a wonderful dinner last night with Dr. Michaels, got some thoughts stimulated, and I'm sure that's just going to carry over into this evening, and you're really in for a wonderful message from him, and something I'm sure that you'll gain something that will get you thinking even more when you leave here. The important part, I believe, inside of me, the important part that I believe that we can take from tonight is not just hearing what Dr. Michael says and not just learning something new and keeping that inside of us. We have to go back out into our communities. We have to go back out into our region. We have to go back out and be a voice not just to be heard in Kentucky, but a voice to be heard in the United States. Because this is the energy capital of America, and we are proud for what we stand for. And we make a difference each and every day. But it's going to take all of us working together and taking this knowledge that we have and going out and showing and educating the country on just what can be done. So thank you for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
Very quickly, before I introduce our next speaker, just like to recognize a couple of people. First of all, they're going to play some dinner music for us in just a moment as well, but let's please have a hand for Rachel and Will Hayes and their talents. If you've ever seen the Kentucky Opera, you've seen their talents on that stage many, many times. Very, very talented. Thank you all for being here tonight. Also, I'd like to recognize some of our media partners. Appalachian News Express is here with us. Thank you very much for all you do in helping promote the event. East Kentucky Broadcasting for all you do for us. The medical leader, Pike TV, is here filming this evening. Thank you very much for that. BT Media for all the audio visual that you have here tonight. Thank you all for your assistance. Now I'd like to introduce our great partner in this program, Mr. John Justice. He has just been a bright spot for me in this event. He just really is, he's the heart and core of the success of this event. And I know that sounds a little dramatic, John, to you, but John is the idea guy. And he really, really knows how to pull it together, and he makes sure that our speaker has an experience. And he does such an amazing job with that. So, John, please welcome Mr. John Justice with Cedar Inn.
Well, it's downhill from here, I guess. Good evening. Appreciate each of you for being here. And on behalf of the Cedar Board of Directors, I want to welcome you to this, our third Energy Summit. And especially special thanks to EQT for your continued sponsorship of this, making this event possible. You all are really in for a treat tonight. I'm not going to formally introduce Dr. Michaels at this point. That will be done a little bit later. But I first met him in the early 90s, and I've seen and heard his presentations 3 times. In fact, the second time was here, back in the mid-90s. Cedar, along with North Carolina Coal Institute, Co-operators and Associates, brought him here for the chamber and the various civic clubs. But anyway, he and the coal industry have a lot in common. We're both hated by a lot of people, and it so happens to be they're the same people for the most part. And I think in his presentation that you will see that he is a rare individual. And not only will you see that, but in knowing him through these years and his positions and all the heat that he's taken. And I guess one of his most infamous things is, if y'all remember the email scandal that broke in England 2 years ago. What do they call that? ClimateGate, where some scientists and college professors were cooking the numbers to make the numbers look worse on the fossil fuels industry. Well, lo and behold, his name was in many of those thousands of emails that he didn't know about. One of his fellow scientists told him later about it, that he was all through it. In fact, one of them mentioned that the next International Climate Conference they saw him at, they was going to whip his butt. So I see you still got it, so you're here. Okay. I want to express my sincere thanks to the Southeast Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and in particular Brad Hall for his great partnership and help, and for his staff, who they do an awful lot of hard work, putting a lot of time on this. And I want to take a minute to recognize our 3 ushers this evening. They're all 3 Cedar volunteers. Karen Hamilton with Wayne Supply here in Pikeville. Wave, Karen. Okay. And Angel Tackett with the Office of Mine Safety and Licensing here in Pikeville. and Terry Tackett with the Highway Department here in Pikeville. I want to just briefly share with you some of Dr. Michael's activities that he's been here. I'm not going to start out with where he started out because it was a very frustrating day. We almost didn't have him. That's a long story, though, but he was supposed to leave D.C. and come to us via Tri-Cities. Well, an hour and a half after I was been waiting in the Hampton, he rose in. He wouldn't email me. He wouldn't call me. Come to find out, he lost his phone in National Airport at security at the check-in. I think they was trying to run him down. He threw his phone at him or something. I don't know what happened. But anyway, and he had to go to Cincinnati and drive from Cincinnati, okay? So he had a very rough day and time getting here. But anyway, he made it. But this morning, he started out by traveling with Lynn Parrish and Henry Cook to Booth Energy's, I believe it was the Matrix mine that they went to for an underground mine tour. And, of course, here in a few minutes, he'll be delivering the keynote for this event. And then after he's finished with this, we'll have a Q&A, and then he'll do a book signing for his latest book, Climate Coup, Global Warming's Invasion of Our Government and Our Lives, edited by Patrick J. Michaels. Then in the morning, he'll travel to Hazard, to WYMT. He'll travel with Rusty Justice, which will be an experience. And where he will do a taping of Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition, with Neil Middleton. And then, depending on his time, he's going to have to drive back to Cincinnati rather than to Tri-City, so this might change. But whatever time's left for us, he's going to try to give him a driving tour of some post-surface, post-mountaintop mining removal development projects. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Anyway, some pretty things that's being done in this region made possible through mountaintop removal. And I want to say a special thanks to Lynn and Henry and Rusty for taking a full day of your busy schedule to host Dr. Michaels, to give him these opportunities. And also to Jim Booth and the Matrix Mine team for providing the underground mine tour this morning. He told me last night, I asked him, I said, have you ever been in a mine? He said, well, back in the 90s, he went into a southern West Virginia, or a southwestern Virginia mine. He said it was about this deep. Is all the space he had. Well, when he got back today, I said, how was it? He said, big mine that Matrix is. But he went from this to being able to stand up and walk and do whatever he wanted to do. But I think he was amazed at the technology. And a while ago, he said, I don't see how they carry all that weight around that the miners have to carry in the underground. So anyway, it's made an impression on him, and I think an experience that he'll take with him. At this time, I'll ask Morgan Chapman, who has been the Cedar chaplain for the past 18 years, I'm proud to say. He'll come and give the invocation. And after that, I will give you your instructions for the menu line. Okay? Morgan.
Thank you, John. If you will, pray with me. Oh, most gracious, kind and heavenly Father, we're thankful for organizations such as this that enables us to gather together on this very important occasion. And Lord, we're mindful that all these resources that we take for granted so often comes from your mighty hand. Help us, Lord, not only to be able to use them, but to be stewards of them as well and pass them on down to future generations. Help us to be mindful, Lord, that you will hold us accountable in the great responsibility that we have of being environmentally safe, but also gathering, Lord, these things together with us, that we can make a better way of life for our children and for future generations. But Lord, we also want to thank you for the ability to look around us and see others in the world who are less fortunate than we. And Lord, to reach out to them and realize that we're the brotherhood of mankind, and even on foreign fields and nations that don't have the things we have. That we'd hear the words of your word, Lord, from the Bible that said to feed the hungry and clothe the naked, heal the sick. Freely we have received these gifts, and freely we ought to give. And Lord, we ask you to bless this food now as we gather around the bountiful table you've given us. May this food be given for the nourishment of our bodies. Lord, let us give our bodies to your service. And always we ask these favors in the name of our Savior, the Lord Jesus. Amen.
At this point, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker tonight. Dr. Michaels is Senior Fellow in Environmental Studies at the Cato Institute and a Senior Research Fellow at George Mason University. Dr. Michaels is past president of the American Association of State Climatologists and was program chair for the Committee on Applied Climatology of the American Meteorological Society. Michaels was also a research professor of environmental sciences at the University of Virginia for 30 years. Michaels is a contributing author and reviewer of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. His writings has been published in the major scientific journals and popular serials such as the Washington Post, Washington Times, Los Angeles Times, and others. He was an author of the Climate Paper of the Year, awarded by the Association of American Geographers in 2004. He has appeared on most of the worldwide major media. Dr. Michaels holds AB and SM degrees in biological sciences and plant ecology from the University of Chicago, and he received a PhD in ecological climatology from the University of Wisconsin at Madison in 1979. Would you please help me make welcome Dr. Michaels?
You're too kind, and it's I'm very, very honored to be here. This is my third trip to Pikeville, and every time I look forward to coming back. It's a beautiful place, and the people are wonderful. And there are other people in this world that may be well-meaning, but may not be so wonderful to you. It would be the Environmental Protection Agency, which is out to take care of coal. And it would be certain pressure groups in Washington and in this country which almost succeeded. Let's go forward and take a look. Now, a little history on what's going on this issue. On June 26, 2009, a bill passed the House of Representatives known as the Waxman-Markey Cap and Trade Bill. It would require the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions of 3% below 2005 levels in 2012, 16% in 2020, 42% by 2030, and 83% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions 38 years from today. Now, you can ask people in Washington how this would be accomplished. An 83% emissions reduction, by the way, means this. These are per capita emissions of carbon dioxide here in the United States, and this is what we were at in 2005, around 20 metric tons per person. By 38 years from now, according to Waxman-Markey, the average American will be allowed in 2050 the emissions of the average American in 1867. That's right. In 1867, there were no cars. Electricity was virtually non-existent. There was no internet. There was no anything. Now, when you ask these bureaucrats, how do you propose to do this? A wonderful thing happens. It's what keeps people employed at the Cato Institute. I'll explain it thusly. I was on a television program, and I asked somebody from one of the agencies, okay, well, we're going to go back to emissions that we had at the end of the Civil War. Could you please tell me precisely the technologies that we would do in order to get there? And I had the Cato moment on television where your opponent looks in that camera and goes, and then doesn't say anything else. Because, see, no one really knows how to do this. But nonetheless, this was passed by the House of Representatives on June 26, 2009. Now, the first thing I did was I decided to see how much warming this was going to prevent, because I knew that this was going to go to the Senate. The environmental people were very confident it was going to be passed. It was going to be signed by the president. And so I wanted to see how much warming this whole thing would prevent, this 83% reduction, with the impact on your life that you simply cannot imagine, because nobody can imagine the technology that would create this. And I use the United Nations figures for global warming, okay? You're going to see that they're wrong later on in this talk, but you know, just for the sake of a straw man or shooting a very large fish in a very small barrel, something on global warming that I never tire of, by the way. I guess I'm not much of a sportsman. Anyway, if we did nothing, according to the United Nations, the global temperature would rise 1.58 degrees Celsius between now and 2050. That number is obviously wrong, but that doesn't matter. If the United States did this Waxman-Markey thing and brought us back essentially to the technological Stone Age in 38 years, the amount of warming that would occur would be 1.54 degrees, 0.04 of a degree less. Now, if every nation of the world that has obligations under the United Nations Protocol on Global Climate Change did the exact same thing that was in Waxman-Markey, the amount of warming that would be prevented is 0.08 of a degree Celsius. We would have, if we did nothing, 1.58. If basically the free world did all that, 1.50 degrees of warming. That's an amount so small that you simply cannot measure it. And the reason for that is because we don't matter very much anymore, and we're going to matter less and less when it comes to carbon dioxide emissions. The blue chart, these are the total emissions for the country. The blue chart is us. Here is 2009. And you can see that our 2009 emissions were what they were in 1995. Why did our emissions drop, by the way? Two things. One, the economy went in the tank in 2008. It takes energy to make things. And number two, and then a miracle occurred, if I might go on from my introduction. You know, 12 years ago, if I spoke in front of you and you said, what's going to happen in the next decade in energy? And I said, oh, we're going to discover that we have hundreds of years of shale, of gas, natural gas, locked beneath the surface. And we're going to be able to get it out with new techniques and with expanded techniques. And remember the current religion in 1900. We are running out of natural gas. August people in high places said this everywhere. You would say I was nuts, but half the reason for the reduction in emissions is switch over of power production to natural gas. The other half is that the economy went in the tank. Now look at the red line. That's China. Okay? When we were emitting 6,000 metric tons a year, China was emitting about 2,500 down here. In 2009, they were at 8,000. That's a threefold increase, 300% increase in emissions in China. By the time we get it out to 2020, they're going to be off this chart, and we're going to be somewhere around here. We are irrelevant. Now, we could commit revolutionary economic suicide if we wanted to, but I don't think that would be a good idea, and nor do the people of this country. This is the Presidential Approval Index. I look at it every day because I live in Washington, and there's a person with a checklist that says if you don't look at this every day, you can't come in the city. The staffers in the House and the Senate, they look at it before they get up and go to the bathroom in the morning. They have it on their computer online. It's done by Scott Rasmussen, and it's the percent of people who strongly approve of the president minus the percent of people who strongly disapprove. So when the index is positive, the president more people like what he does a lot than they dislike it. Well, it's a 3-day running average. And on June 26th, 2009, the cap and trade bill passed the House of Representatives. The first day it had 3 days of, yes, cap and trade is passing the House of Representatives. The Senate's going to pass it. You can't look close enough to see this, but on June 29th, 2009, the president's approval index went negative. And it has not been positive for 1 day since. So, Rasmussen also does something called the generic congressional ballot, where if you're one of the lucky people to be asked on the phone, if you were to vote for a congressperson today, would you vote Republican or Democrat? On June 28th, 2009, the index switched from Democrat to Republican. And it has not been Democrat for 1 week since. By the way, this week it was tied, which is the first time it's done that in a long time. but some new numbers that I've seen in the last several days say that it's going to go down again. And now we have the electoral results of cap and trade. The carnage in the House of Representatives was absolutely stunning. The top one is one of the districts in the country that is thought to be an absolute complete swing district. It's Charlottesville and the University of Virginia. They tend to be pretty liberal, and the countryside's pretty conservative. And Perriello, who voted for cap and trade, lost in that district by about 10,000 votes. Not very far from here in Virginia 9, southwestern Virginia, Perriello had only been incumbent one term. Boucher was gunning for his 15th term in southwestern Virginia. He voted for cap and trade, and he lost. Now, let me just tell you how bad it was and why cap and trade never passed the Senate. In the House of Representatives, every close race on November 2nd, 2010 went to the Republicans. Every last one of them. And almost all of those were Democrats who voted for cap and trade. In the Senate, every close race went to the Democrats. Every one of them. The difference, the Senate did not vote cap and trade. Remember, they both voted health care, so there was something else that was creating that, and it was obviously cap and trade. So on November 3rd, 2010, the president held a news conference. He could have just said we took a whooping like the previous president did. That would have stopped it. But no, some smart aleck asked him something about cap and trade. And his response was, there's more than one way to skin a cat, said Barack Obama on November 3rd when asked about cap and trade. And therefore, it now goes to the Environmental Protection Agency. A little bit of history on this. In the spring of 2007, the Supreme Court ruled in something called Mass v. EPA that if the Environmental Protection Agency found carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases endangered human health and welfare, that it must then regulate them under the Clean Air Act. Never mind that this was a massive stretch. If you ask anyone who wrote the Clean Air Act, they will tell you that that was never intended to regulate greenhouse gases. But our activist court decided that it did. And sure enough, lo and behold, less than 90 days after the president was inaugurated in 2009, the EPA proposed a finding of endangerment and put it out for public comment. I should show you my comments sometime if you'd like to see some somewhat incendiary language. Well, why did we have the endangerment finding released on December 7, 2009 was because the president was going to go to Copenhagen and try and hector everybody into reducing their emissions, and he didn't have cap and trade to show for it because the people in the Senate read the polls and said, no, we're not going to do this. And so he went to Copenhagen and harangued the BRIC nations, the Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, et cetera, and they told him, he walked into their meeting and said, hey, we're having no secret meetings here. And they said, no, please leave, we're discussing things here. And then he went to the podium and announced, this meeting has been a great success, and got into his airplane in a hurry because there was a blizzard bearing down on Washington, D.C. And here was the scene with the plane firewalled across the Atlantic, faster than any westbound passage of the Atlantic in a subsonic plane that I have ever seen, and guess what? He didn't make it. This is a symbol of what has been happening internationally on global warming. The president returning to Andrews Air Force Base in a 0-0 whiteout in Air Force One. So he has to go to the Environmental Protection Agency now to go forward. And this is what I want to talk about. The EPA is an organization that exists to regulate on the environment. And what they did in their endangerment finding was they had to come up with a scientific cover for their endangerment. So they based it largely on this one volume. It's called Global Climate Change Impacts in the United States. And it's like, you can't read this very well, but it's from something called the U.S. Global Change Research Program, which basically is every bureaucracy and every scientist who's getting a lot of money from the government. Now, they are going to produce a report that says this is overblown, of course. Right. No, it's always going to be worse than we thought. And this is the document that they produced. I brought it with me to serve up as a prop in a little bit. In global warming, in this thing, this is the worst document I have ever read of its type. I was asked to review it when it first came out, and I said, I've read like 20 or 30 government compendia on climate change, and without a doubt, this is the worst one that I have ever seen. Every paragraph can be questioned, I wrote. There is not a statement that is complete scientifically and says all the science that is involved in this issue. Well, why is that? Why is it always worse than we thought? Because there is incentive for scientists to say it's always worse than we thought, and there's incentives for scientists to lie and tell you we're even-handed. Oh no, we're totally even. Here's the amicus brief from a group of people calling themselves the climate scientists for the Mass v. EPA Supreme Court case. Outcomes may turn out better than our best current prediction, but it's just as possible that environmental and health damages will be more severe. The key words are just as possible, and they translate this from scientific ease into something that everybody can understand. We're fair. Every new piece of research that we do has a 50-50 chance of saying things are either going to be worse than we thought, or hotter than we thought it was going to be, or they're not going to be as bad as we thought, or cooler than we thought it was going to be. I was in an academic department at the University of Virginia for 30 years. I know that's not the case. But what our friends are doing is they're allowing us to test their hypotheses. So what I did was I went and got 13 months of Science and Nature magazine, and I took the articles on global warming in them. I classified them, put them in a pile. This one says it's worse than we thought. This one says it's better than we thought. This one's I can't tell from looking at it. And you should have an equal probability, according to what my scientific community believes, that it's fair, that research new findings could be either worse than we thought or not as bad as we thought. Well, there were 115 articles on climate change in these 13 months. 23 of them I couldn't tell. They were neutral. 9 were not as bad as we thought, and 83 were worse than we thought. So that's like flipping a coin 92 times and getting 9 or fewer heads or tails. You want to know how many times on the average you have to flip a coin 92 times to get 9 or fewer heads or tails just once? It's that number on the bottom of the page. So, no, the profession is biased, and that's the problem. The profession is biased. It is in its own self-interest. If you don't think it is, let me ask you a question. We could play the game, the congressional hearing game, if we could. Okay? Look, you look like the administrator of NASA. Now, what's your name? Wes Smith, Dr. Smith. Hi, I'm Al Gore. I'm just like you, only better. Now, scientists have told me, you are the administrator of NASA, that global warming is the most important problem confronting mankind. Could your agency effectively use $3 billion more per year to study this? Dr. Wes, could you? Yes, that's right. Because you see, these 4 guys here are Dr. Wes's heads of the sub-agencies within NASA, okay? And they're not sitting there with combs in their pockets, okay? What they've got are knives. And if he said no, they're sitting in back of the hearing, they go through his back, and that's the end of Wes. And so, Wes, what you tell these guys at the end of the hearing, besides you all high-five each other as soon as the press is out of the way, and you say, hey, listen, man, I need a proposal from you, from your group, and your group, and I need it within a month. So you go to all your scientists or all the other people in this room, and they are supposed to write proposals as to what they're going to do with the $3 billion, okay? Fine. So let me ask you a question. Reverend, are you going to write the proposal that says this is no big deal? I don't think so. The Reverend is a moral man. Now, are you going to write the summary proposal to Administrator West that says, well, most of my scientists think that this is kind of exaggerated? No, because you're out of there as soon as you do that. Fine, Wes, you're a great scientist. You got the money, and you wrote a paper, and you submitted it to Nature. And you know what the paper said? It's worse than we thought. Oh my God, I'm shocked. And who are the reviewers? The reviewers are all your other scientist buddies who are getting the same money. So, you know what the reviewers are going to say? They're going to say, wow, this is a great paper. Now, there might be somebody with the audacity to write a paper and say, well, actually, it's probably not going to warm up quite as much as we thought. And by the way, people are going to survive. And if you actually let them have enough money, not only will they invest in technologies that are clean, they will probably result in a much better world. So let's just leave them alone and let people take care of it. How are you going to review that paper? Ooh, that paper's bad. And so that's what happened. It's called public choice. It has nothing to do with people conspiring to lie. It has people responding to incentives. Unfortunately, there's an overhead for the response to that incentive, and it's called your business. Get it? So that's the cost. And it's worse than we thought all the time. Here's my latest, it's worse than we thought. Human contribution to more intense precipitation regimes. Nature magazine. Our results show that the global climate models we have used may have underestimated the observed trend, blah, 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 and it's going to be worse in the future. Well, actually, they could have referenced a paper that I wrote in 2004 because, in fact, there is more heavy rain than there used to be. I looked to see how much more it's raining on the heaviest day of rain in the year, averaged across the United States. And I thought you'd like to see the actual numbers. You know, when you do something like this, when you don't put any numbers in something, that's not science. That's mathematical philosophy. It is not science. So let's actually look at the numbers. And here it is. This is the trend in precipitation on the wettest day of the year. The wettest day of the year on the average in 1900 was 2.35 inches of rain per day. By the year 2010, it's 2.6 inches of rain per day. So what you have is a 1/4 inch more of rain falling on the heaviest day of the year. That's it. Now, it's true. If you read the headlines, flooding rains increase in the United States, or extreme precipitation increases in the United States. They didn't tell you that the increase on the heaviest day of the year was this much. And for that, I think you should all get put out of business, okay, for a lousy 1/4 inch of rain. So what do I want to do about this? I have a very, very bad attitude, in case you haven't noticed. And this document really, really bugs me. And I've decided, I will tell you this. The EPA is not going to stop because of their endangerment finding. You can elect a Republican president if you want and think that that Republican president is going to tell the EPA to back off on you. You can think that, and he may do that. But Environmental Defense Fund and Natural Resources Defense Council will be in court in 2 days if he does that, saying, excuse me, the Supreme Court said that if you find this is an endangerment that you must regulate. It didn't say that the president can tell you not to do this. This is what the Supreme Court said has to happen. So the EPA would have to reverse their endangerment finding based upon this document with 569 scientific references and beautiful, beautiful colors. Look at this document. Look at how pretty it is. Really a pretty document. Fantastic. You know why? Writer-in-chief was that great scientist, Susan J. Hassel from Climate Communications, Inc., LLC. Sorry, not an Inc. And Susan Hassel's previous experience in global warming science consists of only this, which was she was a producer of incendiary documentaries on global warming for HBO. That's what science is sunk to as we go on. So anyway, I decided instead that I was going to have some fun. Because remember, when I reviewed it, I said there's something wrong with every paragraph in this document. So I went to Ed Crane, the head of Cato Institute, and I said, Ed, I want to write a book that looks just like this. And it's going to have exactly the same format, exactly the same flow, and it's going to put in all the science that they left out. And I said, Crane said, how much is that going to cost? And I said, about $300K, because I'm going to have to get 6 scientists to work with me, and they don't work for free. And he said, fine, get half the money and you can start it. Well, I got half the money, and I started it. And here's the way it's beginning to look. Here's the cover, okay? Here's the cover of your government document that is designed to put you out of business. And here is Addendum, Global Climate Change Impacts in the United States, report of the Cato Institute. Now, you will notice something interesting here at the bottom. In the government's document, you see these rising temperatures, okay? This is how you don't tell the truth and get away with it. The title of the document is Global Climate Change Impacts in the United States. So last I heard, this is the United States. This is the United States. Is this the temperature of the United States? No. Here's the temperature for the last 20 years of the United States. I decided to put this one on here because there's no warming whatsoever in this temperature record. And we have other little things that are going on. Here is their report, page 13, the section on global climate change. Here is our report, the section on global climate change, page 13. What they say, human activities have led to large increases in heat-trapping gases in the past century. Okay, here's our first bullet. Human activities have resulted in the emissions of gases that warm the lower atmosphere, as well as particles that counter the resultant warming, and we have changed the surface in ways that we don't understand. Goes on and on. Agriculture. Look at this wonderful report that they have on agriculture on the right-hand side. That's them. This is us. Very hard to tell apart. Why is this? I don't mean to blaspheme, but you need a Bible, climate Bible, to help you out. This is your climate Bible that you're going to be able to take to court when I'm done with it. Here, key messages. Agriculture. Many crops, this is the government. Many crops show positive responses, oh that's good, to elevated carbon dioxide and low levels of warming, but higher levels of warming often negatively affect growth and yields. And for that, I wrote, elevated carbon dioxide increases the productivity and water use efficiency of nearly all plants, because that turns out to be true. Here's what they have. This is a response of, this is the optimum temperature for corn when it's growing vegetatively, and here's when it's flowering and pollen formation. And they say if the temperature goes up to 100 degrees, it's dead. Okay, that's the end of corn. And this is soybeans. They say if the temperature goes to 107 or something like that, daily temperature, something like that, you're gone. There's no more food. Well, they forgot something, and that is this. You know, the world we live in is an interesting place. The plants that we live with and depend upon, and everything that you ate there was primarily produced by a plant, even if it was meat. Everything that we live with and depend upon grew up, evolved in a world that was A, warmer, and B, had much more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So here's what really happens, and here's what's in our volume. As you put more carbon dioxide in the air, this is increasing carbon dioxide, this is the optimum temperature for photosynthesis in a carbon dioxide atmosphere, which is what we have right now. It's about 25 degrees C. When you make the world warmer and you put CO2 in the atmosphere at the same time, the optimal temperature jumps all the way up to 36 degrees C. It jumps 11 degrees. Nobody thinks it's going to warm up 11 degrees. So what you're doing when you put all this CO2 in the air is you make plants able to respond to warm temperatures and to take advantage of what is really just unleashing what's in their evolutionary genes. They're happy. CO2 makes plants happy. Warm weather makes plants happy. Well, on this planet, the warmer it is, as long as there's moisture, the greener it is, in case you haven't noticed. So the U.S. GCRP report, U.S. Global Change Research Program report, has this picture. Herbicide losses effectively. Herbicide loses effectiveness at higher CO2. Here's some crops grown in the current concentration, and here it is at 680 parts per million, something we might get to by the year 2100. I kind of doubt that because technology will change rapidly, and make sure you ask me a question about that at the end of this talk. Oh, but this is bad. See, these are weeds. Weeds are taking over the crops. Well, I have a little picture for them that I think is a little bit better. Here is a tree grown in the current concentration of carbon dioxide at the Arizona State University. Here it is at 150 parts per million more than we have now. Here it is at 300, and here it is at 450. You see how much bigger the trees are that grow where there's more carbon dioxide in the air? That's because they've gone back to their evolutionary roots. They've gone back to what they evolved in. Here's the growth response to carbon dioxide. Percent growth enhancement. Just goes up and up and up and up the more carbon dioxide you put in the air. Yeah, that stuff you're putting in the air is plant food, okay? Now, here's the U.S. GCRP report. 569 scientific citations. You can count them up. They're numbered right here in the back of the report. See them all? There are 569 of these. Well, I've been working on my project since April 1st. And right now, as of when I left for Pikeville, I was up to 578 citations. In other words, there's more science than they left out, than they put in. That's why you're going to be able to use this document. And hopefully with your support, I'll be able to finish it because I'm about $120,000 short. That was a little bit of begging right there. I'm done. Okay. Now, I want to finish this talk with a little basic global warming science, just to keep you from having too many nightmares about climate change, although you have nightmares about going out of business. I have nightmares about going out of business, too. And the older I get, the sooner I'm going to go out of business, unfortunately. Well, anyway, here's some basic global warming science. I won't belabor it too much, but remember this. The response of temperature to a change in atmospheric carbon dioxide is what we call a logarithm. It's a function that looks like this. The more if you put in increasing increments, you get less and less warming out. It never stops. Okay? It always produces a little more warming, but it produces less and less and less and less. Now, we put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we think, as an exponential function, a compound interest function. Looks like this. So you have a response to carbon dioxide like this, and you're putting it in like this. And what do you think that adds up to? It adds up to a straight line. Yes, you paid $10 billion for scientists to tell you that adding up a logarithm and an exponent gives you a linear increase in temperature as you put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as a low-order exponent. And by the way, that's what our climate models do too. You know, the next time somebody says, the planet is warming at an increasing rate, that would really be bad. Because the computer models, obviously, if this is right, should predict the planet would warm at a constant rate, not an increasing rate. And let's take a look at the computer models for what's called the mid-range emissions scenario from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There they are. Each piece of colored spaghetti is probably about $500 million or so. Maybe a little less than that, but this is one expensive graph. It's 21 climate models proving that if you add up a logarithmic, as what we call forcing, and an exponential increase in the forcing agent, you get a straight line. That's shocking, okay? So, question. Are we on a straight line or has warming stopped? This is one where a lot of people are going to take a little bit of exception with me, but I want to tell you something. It hasn't warmed. There's no significant warming trend in the monthly surface temperature data going back to October of 1996. This is the annual data right here. And that has been used to say that global warming has stopped. Now, and you'll often see this graph. Now, I want to tell you something. Most people think there were two warmings in the 20th century. The first one was about 0.5 degrees Celsius, a little less than that, between 1910 and 1940. You didn't do anything. Carbon dioxide had very little, if anything, to do with that. We hadn't put enough of it in the air. Okay? Then there's another warming that begins in 1976 and ends in 1998. That's that peak right here. And that's about of the same magnitude. And the debate is about how much of that warming is caused by what I call pernicious economic activity. It's a joke, meaning everybody's life gets better, and yeah, there's a little bit of warming, and that's a reasonable debate. I don't think it's all as much of it as many other people do, but what do I know? Anyway, the question is that really a straight line warming, given this behavior? Well, let's take a look at the warming since the temperature history of the planet since 1976, which is when the second warming of the 20th century starts. This is kind of shocking. Here, this is the same data that I showed you in the previous graph, okay? And this is the actual behavior. Tell me that's not a straight line upwards. It is. And what's nice about it is it allows us to tell you how much it's going to warm in the future. Look at, see all these things? These are different climate models. We also have 6 different weather forecasting models that we use every day. I used to teach weather forecasting. It's a great thing to teach. And on several days, the models will say different things. Do you know what you tell students at the, capital T-H-E, University of Virginia in weather forecasting when the computer models show different things? Hey, look out the window. That's what you do. You say, hey, which model has been performing the best for the last couple days? Or which model performed the best the last time a low-pressure system was moving up the Atlantic coast and deepening off of North Carolina? And that's the one you choose. Well, how do you differentiate between climate models, all of which are producing a linear warming? You look out the window. Okay, so let's look out the window. What we're going to do is we're going to take this data and look out the window, and there's your answer. What you can see is the observed warming trend is likely to be at or below the lower limit of these computer models for the mid-range United Nations scenario. Now, that's something that you can live with and something you should be able to take to the bank. You see, because you don't really care whether or not there is global warming. You really don't care whether or not you cause global warming. You care about how much it warms, meaning the amount of warming. If it's a modest warming of a degree or two, come on. You can't tell me that that's a net negative for the planet. Nobody has ever demonstrated that in any work that has not been challenged and run into the ground. If the warming were primarily in the winter, in the night, rather than the summer during the day, would you be all that upset? Well, it turns out that's the way it is. Greenhouse warming tends to take place at night and in the winter, in the coldest part of the year. Greenhouse warming has the effect of warming up the coldest air masses on the planet and turning deserts into deserts. Okay? In other words, the net temperature effect is not something that I would cry about that much. Now, what you could do, if you had a reasonable, modest warming trend, which is like what we see, is I would offer you the following. The best thing to do is to do nothing. Mean old Dr. Michaels said we should do nothing about global warming. No, I didn't say that. Doing nothing is doing something. Doing nothing is allowing you to keep your money and invest it in whatever you want to invest it in, rather than taking it in a futile attempt to stop warming. You saw the Kyoto Protocol wouldn't stop it right there early in the talk. And furthermore, you saw that it's modest at any rate. No. So you take your money and you invest it. Instead of giving it to the government, to throw it at solar energy and windmills. Windmills which require tremendous amounts of backup power. They don't work when it's very hot and when it's very cold because the wind tends not to be blowing. And solar energy, which will never, ever, ever be a major contributor to our electrical grid in any of its current forms. It just doesn't exist. Right now, it's at 0.1%, maybe. And I think that's jimmying the numbers a little bit, despite throwing money at Solyndra and every other beggar that came to Washington with a solar panel on their back. So, at any rate, keep your money. Instead, you'll invest it. Now, if you don't like that story, if you think that's wrong, let me tell you what happened when the government didn't take people's money in the last 100 years. I'm going to close this talk by saying, hey, it's 1911, and the Pikeville Chamber of Commerce had some guy come from Virginia who was a noted seer. He could see the future in 1911. And he said, okay, here's what's going to happen. Within about 30 years, the periodic table ends at uranium. We're going to invent a new element called plutonium. And I have a little ball here, and if I hold it together like this, the entire county is incinerated. Not really incinerated. It blows up. You're gone. Everybody's gone. Washington, D.C., gone. Downtown. All of it. A little ball of this metal that was not even invented. What would you say to that guy? You're nuts. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you what he also said. He also said, yeah, and then in about 60 or 70 years, people will fly around the world in aluminum tubes at 600 miles an hour. And 10 years after that, they'll have a little box in their pocket that can access all the information in the world, or play Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, something that a person might be lucky enough to hear once in their life in a live performance. It would play it at will as he went over the mountains at 35,000 feet at 600 miles an hour. You would say, that guy's nuts. But see, that's what happens. If you leave it alone and let people invest in their future the way that they would like to. So at any rate, this is my little project. I'm doing it. People ask me why I'm doing it. You know why? Because I like to. And I like it because I get to tell the truth. And I get to talk to people like you about telling the truth. Thank you very much. Are we questions?
We're now going to open it up for questions. We'll have a mic on each side of the room. So if you'd like to stand up and raise your hand, kind of identify yourself, and we'll bring a mic to you. You can ask a question to Dr. Michaels.
Please. Okay, I've completely taken care of the subject. Well, look out, EPA.
Supposed to remind you about a question about how maybe technology is going to change going forward in carbon emissions.
Well, that's because I got excited. I went along with what I said earlier. There's no doubt that the future there are incentives for any corporation in any niche to produce things more efficiently than their competitors, or to produce things that are more efficient than their competitors. It doesn't apply absolutely everywhere, but it's a pretty good thing, pretty reasonable guideline, and to do it in a quality way. And if you don't have the money to invest in those technologies, then it doesn't happen. The perverse effect of cap and trade would be to keep us in the technological Stone Age and to be poor. You don't do cap and trade. You keep the money in your wallet, presuming that Washington doesn't burn too much more of it, a big presumption I might add, and you do invest. Or somebody else will. China, they aren't burdening themselves with this kind of stuff. You watch. And then all of a sudden you will see that there are cleaner technologies. Look, again, over the last 100 years, nobody could have imagined. We could do this experiment 200 years ago. In the early 19th century, Thomas Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark out to the Northwest. They came back and they said, hey, Mr. President, we can get to the Pacific Ocean. We only have to traverse one mountain range in a portage, and it's not that long at Lolo Pass in Montana. Mr. Jefferson says, wow, we have to make sure this country can have commerce. And so he goes to all his top scientists and says, what are we going to do? These guys are right. We're going to expand to the West Coast, and we have to be able to communicate. And the government scientist says, we need to tax the people because we need a world-class network of barge canals. Meanwhile, the railroad was being invented. That's what would happen. You've got to let diversity reign. You can't have the government choosing technologies. And I offer you those crazy windmill vanes blocking Highway 23 and then they're going to be installed in West Virginia, and it's going to be discovered that they really don't produce a lot of power and the subsidies were wasted. But this is wrong, okay? Next.
I do a lot of watching the Discovery Channel, and one of the big things that you see on that program was the polar ice caps are receding. And
yep.
I wanted to ask if you would kind of comment on that.
If I have that
whether
with me.
that's scientific
Nope.
Or not.
Nope, I don't. Well, I'll tell you, it depends on where you look. I just want to get back to my spacer bar. Depends on where you look. The ice in the, okay, first of all, we only have data, really good data on polar ice beginning in 1979, because that's when the first satellites were launched to monitor polar ice. Do you know what the argument was made to launch those satellites in 1979? Remember, the budgetary process has to begin several years earlier before you get a satellite. What was the argument that was made to and by NASA? We need to monitor the ice because of global cooling. And yes, okay. And in fact, summer temperatures in the Arctic in the late 1970s had dropped to the lowest value that they were at since the early 1920s. So when those satellites went up, they started measuring ice that was expanded far beyond its average value in the northern hemisphere. And then the temperature warmed up, and it went to what was its average value in the 20th century, and now it's below that. Yes, there's loss of ice up there, but remember, you're starting at a high point in 1979. Now the southern hemisphere. One of my favorite places. I want to go to Antarctica, but I want it to be warm, so I guess I'm not going to go to Antarctica. Antarctica is surrounded by an ocean. Antarctica is incredibly cold, okay? It's surrounded by an ocean. Let's say the ocean warms up a few tenths of a degree, a couple tenths of a degree. The vapor pressure of water is greater. There's more water vapor in the air, and it's converged over Antarctica by the jet stream. What do you think it falls as? Rain? Snow. And so if you take a look at ice coverage in the southern hemisphere, there's a statistically significant increase since the satellite went up in the southern, on a southern polar projection, and a decrease in the northern. The net is a loss, but it's a loss that's relatively small, and frankly, it doesn't matter anyway. Watch. Now I got stupid. I do this on television, on Fox. I go, I'm an intellectual. Look, for 3,000 years after the end of the last ice age, from about 9,000 to 12,000 or 8,000 to 11,000 years ago, the Arctic ice was gone. Did you know that? At the end of summer. It had to be. You know why? Because buried in the tundra all the way to the Arctic Ocean are trees. And you can carbon date the trees because the peat is very acidic and it's preserved. If you fell in the tundra, you'd be preserved, okay? And they could carbon date you. Oh, you're too old for carbon dating. Oh, I'm just kidding, of course. So you can see that the trees were up there for 3,000 years. Now, we know how warm it has to be in the summer for the forest to grow. And it has to be 13 degrees warmer in July than it is now. So or at the pre-industrial period. So there was 13 degrees of Arctic warming for 3,000 years. What do you think the ice was like at the end of summer? It wasn't there. It wasn't there. And the polar bear survived 3,000 years of temperatures much warmer than they are now. And the Inuit culture radiated. I think for this, we need to make everybody poor. Next question.
I just want to make a comment more than a question. Yeah, go right ahead. It'd be better.
How do we reverse the endangerment finding? I mean,
what's going to happen?
Legislatively or
legislatively, no, you can't reverse their endangerment finding legislatively. And that would be a tremendous court battle that I do not know how that would work. Because the Supreme Court has spoken that if you find this an endangerment, you must regulate it. Does that mean that Congress can say, you cannot regulate this? I don't know that. But I do know that it's not going to happen by executive order, and that it's going to go into court the moment somebody tries to say EPA doesn't regulate it. And I think it's going to be adjudicated, frankly, on all the science that they forgot. And these cases are beginning to work their way through the courts right now. And they will go forward. Every time they announce another layer of regulation, there'll probably be a case. And eventually, this thing is going to be done, hopefully, in about a year. And people will be using that. That's why I'm doing it.
That's a good question. I'm going to touch on that in comments I have. But first of all, I'd like to say that the folks that are in this room are coal and natural gas. And here in this community and throughout Eastern Kentucky, we're one voice. We don't speak separately. I think I can say that with confidence. And the leaders in this room, you got the legislative leaders and as well as industry leaders, banking leaders, and Chamber of Commerce. And I think we're really unique as to when compared to anyone else. But I just want to make sure that everybody in this room realizes who the gentleman that is talking to us is. He is the front line. I forget what the line in World War I was. They were out there in the trenches fighting the Germans. This is the man that's fighting for us. He's fighting to save our jobs, to save our industry, to save our way of life. And if you don't know that, trust me, it's true. This man's been my hero ever since I first met him 15 years or more ago, and I just love what he's doing for us. And you know, he doesn't have family here. He's got no folks that live here. He's got a few friends here, maybe people, acquaintances he's made, but he's out there doing what? He's fighting our battle for us, even though he doesn't know us. And we owe a great deal of gratitude to him and all the folks that he works with. And if you didn't hear what he said, if you didn't read between the lines, we already know this, Dr. Michaels, is that these people are trying to change our way of life.
Oh, yeah.
They do want us to sell the quilts and the molasses or whatever else we can sell in little shops around here.
You mean the Appalachian Cultural
That's right.
Reservation?
And wood carvings or whatever. I mean, that's where they want us to be. And they don't care how they put us there. So we owe you a great deal of gratitude. And this is what he's focused on here has been coming on for decades. And it's this part of the scenario, you know, that goes on over into everything, into water, into mercury, into emissions, and into trying to prevent us from mining coal, from transporting coal, from using coal and natural gas. And it's, you know, if I asked him last night, I said, how do we clone you? Because, you know, we all have a finite, we're all here just for a short time. But, you know, we need to help this gentleman out in some way or another. I don't know if it's
I can tell you how.
This report he's working on, I can't tell you how important it is. Because, you know, I don't care if the most conservative person, I don't care if you put Don Blankenship ahead of the federal government. He cannot change this finding without going through the same process, without some basis for it. So this project he's working on, this book he discussed, may seem something that's fairly inconsequential, but it's not. It's extremely important because that is the basis for reversing this finding that the Supreme Court relied on in the Massachusetts case in 2007 that allows the federal government to decide differently. And if we don't get that done, then we're going to be in the same hellhole that we're in now, and it's going to get worse, and it's just going to get deeper. So I don't know how we do it, but looking around the room here, I know we have the resources to help him out. He hasn't asked me to make this comment, and he may be a little embarrassed by doing this, but you know, it doesn't have to be to fund the rest of his project. He's got other backers, but I think we do have the resources here to at least help him complete this project, and which will do nothing but serve our own interest. So I say again how much we appreciate a fellow that has no roots here in Eastern Kentucky, has no roots in the coal industry, has no roots in the natural gas industry, but he's really gone to bat. He's out there in front. He tackles the hard issues every day. He's training others to come up behind him, and we need to help him.
Thank you, Charles. That was really wonderful, and I appreciate that. Let me just give two brief comments on that. Number one, this is a Cato Institute project, and if you are interested in it, Cato is tax deductible. You would write to the people at Cato and say you're interested in this project, and that would be that. With regard to people following, that's an important thing. And if we are successful, right now the reason you see so few is because the professional costs are so dear. There's a reason that I'm not at University of Virginia anymore, and it has nothing to do with science, obviously. What we need to do is to demonstrate that the people who will speak out can be successful. And I think I have nonetheless been able to be that. And as long as you can ensure that we still have a voice out there, there are some people that are going to say, yeah, I'm going to do that, Right now, the pressures against doing it are absolutely shocking. Let me explain briefly how bad the pressures are. You go to graduate school, and you are told as part of your graduate school PhD instruction, your job is to get money, to get research money and to publish papers. Because if you don't publish enough papers, after 6 years, you are gone. You will not be promoted to associate professor without term. That's tenure. You will be gone. Now, how do you get all that money? Well, let's see. Who are the purveyors of global climate change research money? Industry? No. It's the federal government. You're not going to get a grant. We just went through this exercise. You're not going to get a grant by saying this is not a problem. And then that person, if that person writes a paper that says, oh, this guy's full of beans, we know he's exaggerating, guess what? You get 20 letters when a person comes up for tenure. If one of them says the guy's bad, he's gone. So you can't do it. What you got to do is you got to offer an alternative pathway. And my proposal has been this, and I've said it elsewhere. There exists a world now that is competing with the academy, and that is the think tank world. Life at Cato is not that much different than it is at University of Virginia, except you substitute appearing on television and writing op-eds for teaching students. That's really about the only difference there is. The rest is research, et cetera, and communicating and all that. If we can show young people there's another way that you can be successful and make a difference, then that's the way to go. And I just would like to sort of encourage that activity. Thank you very much. Question?
Thank you, Dr. Michaels. My name is Mike Laszlo. I work for American Electric Power, and we take coal and turn it into one of the most wonderful products that was ever invented.
Called electricity.
Called electricity.
Oh, no, that comes from a plug. I happen to know that it comes from the plug.
I guess what I'd like you to comment on, I've read where there was a recent study that was completed on surface temperature measurements.
Mueller study.
The Mueller study. And I think and from what I've read, you can take whatever conclusion you want when you look at the data, and I think he was one of the guys that said, I looked at the data, and he was supposedly was a skeptic, and then he says that it's worse than what he thought.
Well, look, there's a thing about scientists and television cameras, okay? And there's a lot of attention-seeking behavior, I think. But what Mueller did was he looked at much of the same data that everybody else looks at, which shows a warming. And his finding that the surface temperature is warmer than it was 100 years ago. Listen, I got a secret. Nobody let this out of the room, please. The sun will rise tomorrow. It's about that shocking, okay? And that's what you get when you look at the same data. So it doesn't answer any of the real questions. The real question is how much of this is caused by greenhouse gases, and I think the evidence is pretty strong that at least half the warming, meaning the one in the early 20th century, didn't have anything to do with it, and not all of the second warming had anything to do with it. He's not touching that. This was a giant nothing burger. Now, for those who expected that he was going to find that there was no such thing as warming, I mean, I am sorry. Take a look at the satellite data. Yes, it shows less warming than the surface, but it still shows that warming trend. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to get excited about a few tenths of a degree of warming, aside from the fact that the winters tend to be warmer.
We've gone slightly over time, but
Okay.
we can take one more pressing question if anyone has got. See one in the back here.
Where?
The question was, where is Al Gore?
I'm in my 12,000 square foot house, and I bought carbon offsets that no one can verify.
Let's have a round of applause.
Yes, go ahead. Thanks a lot. Oh, thank you. That's very nice. You're very kind. Thank you very much. Sorry, I had
Thank
to.
EQT Corporation for their sponsorship tonight. So please, round of applause for EQT. Thank you all very much for being here this evening. God bless, and we'll see you next time.